Hey there everybody, welcome to another episode of Bert's Bike. Today we're going to do the oil change on my 2012 Triumph T100 Bonneville. Alright, let's jump into it. Alright, so before we start, I'll be referencing this manual. It is the Haynes manual for 01 to 2015 Triumph Bonneville. So if you're planning on doing your own maintenance, this is something really good to have on hand. Alright, so the next thing you need to decide is what kind of oil you want to use. I went with the Castrol 10W40 Power 1. It is specifically a motorcycle oil, and it's JASO approved or whatever the heck that means. But in your Triumph manual it says that it should be specifically JASO, so take that for what it's worth. I think the most important thing is you get motorcycle oil and it's the right weight. So interestingly enough, Triumph recommends a 10W40 or 15W50. So, you know, if you're living in a really hot environment all the time, 15W50. So the reason why I went with this is just because it was easily available on Amazon. Yeah, and most auto parts stores I think will carry this exact one. So the next thing you need is your oil filter. The oil filter I went with was the OEM Triumph one. Triumph uses the same oil filter for the majority of their motorcycles, if not all their current motorcycles. So of course you're also going to need your crush washer. I did not go with Triumph crush washer, I just went and got the right size off of Amazon. I believe it's an M14. I just got those because you could get a whole pack for $6 versus getting one crush washer for $3. My dealer wanted $3 for it, so I just got a whole pack. You need a screwdriver and you need a 13mm socket set with an extension or a 13mm box wrench. So if you're looking for any of these items that are in this video, you can definitely help me out a little bit if you would use the affiliate links below, and also hit that like and subscribe button. And with that said, let's jump into it.
Alright, the first thing you want to do is to get the bike to sit more upright. If you don't have a jack or a stand, you can just use a 2x4.
Second thing you need to do, start it up, run it for about 5 minutes to let the oil heat up in there, and then you need to drain that oil. So to do that, you're going to need to put it in neutral, but after that don't forget to put it in first, since you're raised up a little bit and so the bike doesn't roll forward. So you need to run the bike for about 5 minutes to let everything warm up. And after that's done, let it sit for about 10 minutes to let that oil cool so you don't burn your hands.
The next thing you need to do is you need to remove the oil cap. Now, doing this while you're draining your oil relieves pressure and helps the oil flow out smoother. Also, it's a good idea to wrap your screwdriver in a towel. That way, you won't ruin the chrome on the cap. Once you remove the cap, put it in a clean place, or you can screw it back in slightly, like I did, to prevent any debris from getting in there. The next thing we need to do is to remove the oil bolt. Now, you could either use a 13mm socket with an extension, or you can use a 13mm box wrench. If you choose to go with the socket without the extension, it could be a pretty tight fit. So it's the box wrench for me. Let's crack open that oil bolt.
It's on there pretty tight. There it goes. What you want to do is just loosen this, because a bunch of oil is going to rush out and you got to get your pan under there. So that's loose. Yep.
Alright, get your oil pan lined up and be sure to position it forward because there's about to be a stream of oil coming out.
Alright, and let it drain for a substantial amount of time before you fill it up. Alright, make sure that crush washer came with you. If it didn't, make sure it's not stuck on the oil drain. It looks pretty good. I know a lot of people reuse these, but you know, unless you're in a pinch, don't.
Also, it's a good idea to right the bike and kind of shake it around to get all the oil out from all the different crevices. As you can see, the drainage is pretty much stopped. Once it's stopped, give the bike a good shake, make sure there's not any residual in there. So let's take off the oil filter. You should be able to spin this off by hand by just applying some force. However, mine was on so tight that I had to get a pair of channel locks. I wish I had an oil filter wrench, but I didn't. Now the next step is to clean the mating surfaces for the oil filter. You definitely want to make sure that there's no filter rubber stuck to it or anything or any debris, because you want a good seal when you put that new filter on. So there's a smooth side, you can actually feel it, and the rounded side. And that's the rounded side you need to face that against the oil pan. And the smooth side faces the bolt flange. So if that's your bolt, the flat side goes that way, and the oil pan is that way, goes that way. All right. At this point, you'll want to clean off that drain hole and any excess oil and debris that's on there, and go ahead and start threading the bolt in. It's a good idea to back the bolt out until you feel the threads kind of fall in place, and then start turning it by hand to prevent cross-threading. That's on there. If you over torque this, you're going to be in a world of hurt. 13. Okay, already felt it start. And if you're doing this on the ground like me, you don't have enough leverage here, so you just do it till it feels good. Feel that crush washer crush. Just give it a little bit of a nip. And we're done. Good to go. All right, at this point, it's time to put the filter on. So looking at the Haynes manual, it wants you to pre-soak the filter, but also the most important part here is to smear the rubber seal with oil. Now, this does two things. It helps the rubber seal to the mating surface evenly, but when you go to take the filter off on your next change, that rubber won't get stuck to the engine casing. Okay, once you've filled it and you've smeared that rubber seal, make sure to kind of shake the filter or tap it lightly to get all the air bubbles out. Those air bubbles out of there. Right. So I just went hand tight on that. You can torque that if you want. I think that's unnecessary. All right, here we are. So according to the book, oil change takes 3.3 liters. So I did the filter and the oil, which takes 3.8. So I'm gonna go put in 3, run the bike, and then just see where we're at. It's 2. 3. All right, we're gonna let it run for a few minutes and then check the level. So at this point, I'm leaning the bike up against my leg to make sure the bike is upright and not leaning. Because if the bike is leaning over on the kickstand to any degree, it's going to give you a false reading. So with the bike righted up, it looks like I'm still a little low on oil, so I'm going to add oil slowly and check and recheck. It's better to add a little bit at a time and get the level right than to overfill it and have to take some out. At this point, if you're happy with the level, you are done. Before screwing your oil cap in, make sure that the O-ring underneath is free of debris. Once you've cleaned that off, go ahead and put your oil cap back on, take the bike on a short ride, and just double check for any leaks.
Alright, so in doing this oil change, what did I learn? I learned to trust your instincts on how tight the filter needs to be. Basically, when you screw that filter in, once you feel it catch, you can go another half a turn or just a little bit more than that if you feel like you need some more. Basically, if you can tighten it by hand and it stops naturally, that's where I think it should be, and I think most people would think the same. I don't think there's any need to get a torque wrench out for that. And the next thing is when you're tightening the bolt, the oil bolt, once you get to a certain point, you're going to feel that crush washer crush in, and then maybe you can just give it a little bit more, and that's all you really need. So the last thing that I noticed too is because you are draining the oil and you're putting new components on, there's going to be some residual oil hanging out. So don't think you have a leak or anything like that. So on the drain bolt specifically, you know, when the crush washer is on the drain bolt, there's oil in between all those. And so when the bike gets hot, that oil is going to seep out of those crevices. And so what you want to do maybe for the first, you know, couple of short rides is, one, wash the bike after a couple of short rides, or you can get some contact cleaner and spray off that drain bolt and just make sure you're not leaking. You can check it up later, make sure it hasn't loosened just by, you know, giving it some pressure on there, but don't monkey on it, okay? So the Triumph oil sump is made out of aluminum, so if you crack that or strip those threads, you are going to be in a world of hurt. So do not over tighten it. If you're going to use a torque wrench on this, use the proper torque wrench or use a great quality one. If you use a really big torque wrench that has, you know, goes from 10 foot-pounds to, you know, 100 whatever foot-pounds, is the torque wrench is so huge that it's not going to read on the lower value of, like, you know, 10 to 15 foot-pounds or whatever. So you need to get either a torque wrench that measures, you know, 1 to 50 foot-pounds or something in inch-pounds where you can do the conversion. Because if you don't have a good torque wrench, more than likely it's not gonna catch and it's just gonna break the bolt. And I know this from personal experience. I have a couple of Harbor Freight torque wrenches and I've minced up a couple of bolts. In my experience, these Harbor Freight torque wrenches are cheaper torque wrenches. They work fine when they're in the sort of median of their value, but when you get to the outer edges, especially the lower edge, it's not really going to read right. So thanks so much for watching. It's been a pretty straightforward job. Just make sure that you set the right amount of time aside when you're working on your bike. If you need any of the items I mentioned in this video, please check out those affiliate links below. They just help me out a little bit. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment. It's Bert's Bike. I'll catch you on the next one.